viewing this now.
דברי קהלת בן דוד מלך בירושלים. הבל הבלים אמר קהלת, הבל הבלים הכל הבל. מה יתרון לאדם בכל עמלו שיעמול תחת השמש. דור הולך ודור בא, והארץ לעולם עומדת. וזרח השמש ובא השמש, ואל מקומו שואף, זורח הוא שם. הולך אל דרום וסובב אל צפון, סובב סובב הולך הרוח ועל סביבותיו שב הרוח. כל הנחלים הולכים אל הים, והים איננו מלא אל מקום שהנחלים הולכים שם. הם שבים ללכת, כל הדברים יגעים, לא יוכל איש לדבר, לא תשבע עין לראות, ולא תמלא אוזן משמוע. מה שהיה הוא שיהיה, ומה שנעשה הוא שיעשה, ואין כל חדש תחת השמש. יש דבר שיאמר ראה זה חדש הוא, כבר היה לעולמים, אשר היה מלפנינו. אין זיכרון לראשונים, וגם לאחרונים שיהיו, לא יהיה להם זיכרון, אם שיהיו לאחרונה.
Shalom, my dear friends, Shalom and Shavuot Tov. Today, the 5th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan of this year of redemption, He Taf Shin Pei, the 3rd of November 2019. It's with a heart flowing with gratitude to God that I'm embarking now on this new series on the Megillat Kohelet, the book of Kohelet of Shlomo HaMelech, Alav Shalom, King Solomon of blessed memory. A continuation of the project that was begun already some years ago with the introduction of Abraham's tent online internet kollel, with the study of Hebrew texts in depth in the light of the commentators, the classical rabbinical commentators. And I was moved particularly to make this study of Kohelet this year while studying the book of Kohelet prior to the festival of Sukkot, because since I'm concurrently studying the book of Job, it struck me so very strongly that indeed Shlomo HaMelech in Kohelet has given us all of the answers that may be attained through Torah faith to the questions that perplexed Job, that perplexed Eov. So now, with thanks to God, we embark on the study of the Hebrew text of Kohelet with the insights of the classical commentaries, particularly of Rashi and of Metzudat David, Rashi, a medieval commentator nearly 1,000 years ago, and Metzudat David in Eastern Europe some 250 years ago, who has written probably the most clear explanation of the simple meaning of our text with allusion to their depth. With God's help, I do hope to, in the second class in this series, give a synopsis of some of the stories that we have about Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, in our Talmud and in the Midrashim, together with a discussion of the place of Kohelet in our Tanakh canon, because Kohelet, on a surface reading, can appear to be very, very cynical. Nothing in the world is of any value, all goes to the same place. Men, just like animals, all end up in the grave. So what is there and what are we doing? So the end of the whole work Sof davar hakol nishma. At the end of the matter, when everything has been heard, there's one bottom line, that is, have fear of God. How does that fit in with the very cynical view that seems to be expressed in much of the text of Kohelet? In many ways, it's a difficult work because many of the verses are very hard to understand the intent of so many of the sayings in this work. It's so very opaque, and often the work seems to be repetitive, coming back again and again to the same themes, the same ideas. So with that said, we will, as I mentioned, have an introduction to the life of King Solomon and the place of Kohelet in his works and in the view of our sages. But without further ado, let us now go into the opening section of Megillat Kohelet, the first 11 verses which stand as the introduction to the whole work. The entire work is in 12 chapters of intermediate length by biblical standards, ranging from some around about 20 verses more or less. And in terms of the parshiot, the divisions into which the text is divided in the traditional writing of the text of Kohelet by the scribes, the section that we are going to be studying today is a parasha in itself. That is to say, it's a complete section which comes to an end at the end of verse 11 of chapter 1. And verse 12, King Solomon gives us an account of himself and his life and his achievements to show us that he alone really was able to write this work, which is really a guide to us what to do in our existential situation here in this life on this earth. And he tells us that he did it all, gone there, been there, done that. And after the king and after attaining such heights of chokhmah, of wisdom, what more is there to be attained? Here, my child, listen to what I have to tell you after all of this. After that introductory section, which spans from chapter 1, verse 12, all the way to the end of chapter 2, verse 26. After that, there is beginning of chapter 3, the very beautiful and well-known section discussing the various different times, the times for good and the times for not so good. And after that, from verse 9 of chapter 3, the entire work is really one or at most two parshiot. All of the text with the many different phases of the text, the many different ideas that are woven together. There is a portion break at the end of chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7. But besides that break, continuously from the end of the portion of the different times, the 28 different times, from chapter 3, verse 9 until the end of the work, it's a continuous discourse. And the discourse opens so very famously with the words that we will now look at. The words of Kohelet, the son of David in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, says Kohelet, all is vanity. Divrei Kohelet ben David melech b'Yerushalayim, havil havolim, omar Kohelet, havil havolim, hakol hevel. Hevel, the Hebrew word, should be translated as a vapor, as an insubstantial vanity, because it has no substance, because it is so evanescent it disappears. Hevel, the son of Adam Harishon, Hevel is called by that name because his life was like a puff of wind, like a breeze, gone here today, gone immediately. And many times in the Psalms and elsewhere in the Tanakh, we find that man's days are compared to hevel, to a vain vapor that disappears. We find in the Kabbalah that the concept of hevel is used also to express some of the most intangible and ungraspable divine emanations. For example, in the Torah of Adam Kadmon, that is to say, in the Kabbalistic concept of the primordial man who is the source of all of the revealed creation, so remote and distant is Adam Kadmon from this lowly material world of substance that the emanations coming forth from the eyes and the ears and the nostrils of Adam Kadmon are called Hevel. So with that we can see how very deep goes the concept of Hevel in the second verse, where our sages tell us that we in fact have 7 vapors. Havil Havolim literally would mean the vapor of vapors. And again, the same phrase repeated later in the verse, Havil Havolim. Well, Havil is a singular, Havalim is plural, and according to a standard rule of interpretation of our texts, a plural means at least 2. So here in the opening words we have 3 vapors, Havil 1, Havalim another 2, and then later in the verse, Havil Havolim again, that is a total of 6. Hakol Havel, it's all vanity, that's number 7. And these correspond to the 7 days of creation, as we shall see. But before we go forward, let us look at the very beautiful comment of Metzudat David on the first verse, explaining why this opening verse tells us so much about the wisdom in the coming work. We now look at the Metzudat David on Kohelet, verse 1. The words of Kohelet, it is known that the best kind of research will never be completed except on the basis of 3 directions together. The one is that all research requires intense study so that we will understand the concept in the among various different kinds of ideas. We contemplate, we compare the different possible interpretations and understandings in order to clarify which of the different interpretations will be the correct, the kosher, the clear one. The second foundation of rational inquiry and intelligent inquiry and deep philosophical inquiry is on the basis of received wisdom. From generations past, the wisdom that is inscribed, we have received by tradition, the wisdom of the knowledge and the fear of God. That is the second principle of inquiry, to go to inquire into traditions and wisdom received from earlier generations. And best of all is the direct teaching of musar, of moral reproof, of moral discourse that a father will want to give over to his son, because the father wants that his son should be developed and developed properly. And if the father gives some punishment to the child, it will be done in a favorable way with the purpose of bringing the son to the truth. all of this is the second category of handing down knowledge from father to son, from sage to pupil. And then the third pillar upon which the inquiry stands is based upon experience from things that actually happen and have happened. And all the more so when these things are all presented in a place where there is a multitude of wise men of deep, profound wisdom and intelligence who have the ability to contemplate and discover the truth of the matter as it really is. And that's why the Ma'atik, says the Matzudat David, that is to say the writer, the editor of these words, in his opening to this book, he starts off that these are the Divrei Kohelet. These are the words of Kohelet. That is to say that these things have been investigated through the gathering together of all different approaches and opinions, joined together with a tradition that has been received from a person who was known to be wise and filled with the fear of God. That is the father of Kohelet, named in the first verse, David HaMelech. And the one that received this was his son, who was taking suckle from the breasts of truth, together with the investigation into all of these matters that took place in Jerusalem, the city of his kingship, whose men were all wise in their hearts and profoundly sharp and intelligent in their minds to fathom to the truth of the matter. And there's nothing that is ever hidden from the king that truly rules over the city. And these opening words, the first words of Kohelet, are as if to say all that is to come in this work has been profoundly investigated and checked over, and there's no more that we can investigate to ascertain the truth of these matters. Divrei Kohelet ben David Melech Yisrael, the words of Kohelet, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. What is the significance of this opening word, Divrei Kohelet? Divrei Kohelet, the opening words are explained in the commentary of the prince of all our biblical commentators, Rashi, Rabbeinu Shlomo Yitzchaki, the medieval commentator, who tells us that Divrei Kohelet, every place where the Hebrew expression words is used in such a context, is nothing but words of reproof. And Rashi goes on to quote from the opening words of Book of Deuteronomy. These are the Devarim, the words that Moses spoke. And later on in Deuteronomy, Moses chastises Israel. Vayishman Yeshurun. Yeshurun became fat and rebelled. Likewise, in the prophecy of Amos, it starts with the word Divrei Amos. And later on, he comes to the reproof to the people. Hear this word, you oxen of Bashan, you cows of the Bashan. Likewise, the prophet Jeremiah opens up with the word Divrei Yirmiyahu. And later on in the prophecy, far much later, he has this terrible reproof to Judah. Ask now, has you ever seen a male give birth to a child? Why is it that all the men of Judah are standing there like women who are in the straits of their contractions? Likewise, in the closing words of King David, quoted in Book of Chronicles, Eile Divrei David, these are the words of David, and in his reproof he speaks about the evil man who is like a thorn. And finally, therefore, we can understand in this context the opening expression Divrei Kohelet. Divrei Kohelet, the words of Kohelet, these are words of reproof, and in the metaphor that is brought in this opening section, V'zorach HaShemesh, the sun shines, all the rivers go to the sea, explains Rashi here a very important thing. Rashi tells us that King Solomon is calling the wicked by the name sun and the moon and the sea, because those celestial beings have no reward. They are so created to go in their tracks, and so are the wicked going to hell with no reward. Thus it is taught in the ancient midrash of the Tanaim, the Sifrei. And from there I've learned that this is talking about the wicked, and King Solomon has compared them to the sun in its full strength, but in the end the sun's simply going to set. Rashi continues that another interpretation of the phrase, all of the rivers go to the sea, what is this saying? It's speaking about the idolaters, those fools that prostrate to the sea, thinking that the sea has some power and can answer their prayers because they see that the ocean is so big and all the rivers are going into the ocean, and the ocean is never full. And people don't know that, they cannot understand that all the water is being recycled constantly. It's all part of a continuous cycle, and there's no independent power in any of these. Continues now entering into the very essence of King Solomon's reproof. What value, what gain is there to a person in all of his labor that he labors under the sun? Well, now before we go into the metaphors of the generations coming and going and the sun shining and setting, let us first look at the Targum on the first verses of Kohelet, the ancient Aramaic Targum, which gives us more insight into what is being said in this section. These are the words, the prophecy that Kohelet, that is Solomon, the son of David, the king, who was in Jerusalem, gave over. Katchazo Shlomo Malko d'Yisrael Baruch Nevuo Yos Malchus Rechavom Berei. When King Solomon, the king of Israel, saw with the spirit of prophecy that the kingdom of his son Rehavam de'osed lispalgo im Yerovam bar Nevot, he saw this kingdom was going to be divided between Rehoboam, and Jeroboam, the son of Nevat, who took away 10 tribes from the house of David to form the independent northern kingdom. He saw that Jerusalem and the holy temple were destined to be destroyed. He saw that the people of the house of Israel were destined to go into exile. Oma b'meimerei havil havolaya al mohodein havil havolaya kol ma de torchis anavo ved avo kulei havolo. That was when he explained vanity of vanities. This world, it's all vanity of vanities. Everything that I and my father, King David, labored for, it has all become vanity. So here we see how the Targum, which derives from the leading student of Hillel, Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel, considered to be the greatest of all the many students of Hillel, while the one that became the head of the Sanhedrin, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, was called the smallest of the pupils of Hillel. Here in the Targum of Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel, we have many additions to the text drawn from the oral tradition that will help us in the interpretation of this new unique work. Now, we may consider that King Solomon, seeing the division of his kingdom and the destruction of his temple, was talking about things that were relevant in his time, but in fact they're completely relevant until today, because it was this after King David had brought all of the 12 tribes of Israel under his kingship. And after King David had laid all the foundations for the temple, having fought many bloody wars to subdue all of the enemies of Israel, everything was ready for King Solomon as a boy of 12 years old, as we shall be hearing in our next session. King Solomon at this tender age, whose name was Shlomo, the one of peace, was destined to rule over a kingdom that was at peace and over the greatest golden age of Israel that has ever been, with the building of his magnificent, unparalleled temple, with the visits of people from all over the world to sit at the feet of King Solomon and try and imbibe his wisdom. And Solomon already saw at the end of his life, after he himself had committed what is considered to be a sin, that he multiplied wives, he saw that all of this was destined to be destroyed and lost. And indeed, the consequences of the split of the two kingdoms, the house of Judah and the house of the 10 tribes, or the house of Ephraim, this endures until today, and until we are able to reunite the 12 tribes together, we will not have our Geulah, our redemption. And so indeed, King Solomon, having seen these tremendous gains in his lifetime and in the lifetime of his father, was to watch the whole thing disintegrate. It could lead a person to cynicism, but we shall see here how King Solomon fortifies himself and Israel through the concept that even though one might build and build in this world and it gets left in the hands of God alone knows who, nevertheless, if a person devotes himself to the acquisition of Torah and mitzvot and ma'asim tovim, they will have their goodness in the world of truth. So to continue now with the Targum on the third verse, before we go on forward with the Hebrew text. And the third verse, Targum says like this, and again, very important insights into the meaning of our text. Ma'moisar isla enosh bosadi yamus min kol torchei dehutorach tches shimsho ba'al mohodein. What benefit is there for a person after he will die, after all of his efforts that he has expended under the sun, ba'al mohodein, in this world? Ella hein lemesak be'raiso, except if the person was engaged in the pursuit of the Torah, which includes both study and practice. The Kabbalah agir shalim le'alma de'asei kadem more almo, in order to receive the complete reward in the world to come before the master of the world. So here again, the Targum is filling in for us the things that are absent in the explicit text before us. And he's explaining that there is this world and there is the world to come, which is not apparent from the actual text of Solomon. Going back now to the Hebrew text, before we come back to Solomon's elaboration of the question, what benefit is there for a person for all of his labor under the sun, let us look at Rashi's comment on this concept of being under the sun. Rashi gives a couple of important insights here on the opening verse, Havan Havolim Omar Koheles. Koheles Kore Tagor. Koheles is complaining. Omer al kol yitzias shivas yimei bereshis ya kol hovel shel havolem hu. He's saying that the entire creation, which all came out of these 7 primordial days of creation, it's all vanity, vanity of vanities. And Rashi's interpretation on the words Ma Yisron, what benefit is there? Ma Yisron, the Hebrew expression Yisron, is what is more than I started off with. Sachar, reward. Mosar, that is what is gained. Tachas Hashemesh. Tachas Hashemesh, the verse would be translated into English, under the sun. But Rashi points out a new facet of this concept, under the sun, Temuras Atoiro, in place of the Torah. Shehi Kriya Or, the Torah is called light. And what benefit is there to a person if he exchanges the light of the Torah for the gains of this world? We learn that the Torah is called light from the verse in Proverbs for Torah Or. Says Rashi, explaining the intent of the verse, every labor which a person pursues, replacing the engagement, the activity of the Torah with that earthly labor, what possible reward ultimately will be from that earthly, material, mundane labor. And now, in the ensuing verses, with the metaphors of the generations that come and go and the course of the sun and its route around the world, starting now with verse 4, Dor hoilech v'dor bo v'oretz le'olam omedes. A generation goes, a generation comes, and the earth stands forever. Here we are on the very deepest level, alluding to the constant, ever-repeated cycles that go around and around and around. Let us first look at the Targum on this verse 4. Omar Shlomo Malko B'ruach Nevuah, says King Solomon with the spirit of prophecy, the Rotovet Tzadikaya, the Azel ben Almo, begin Chayve Dora Bisho, the Rishayo, the Asidin Lemese Basreyon, the good generation of the righteous that goes from the world on account of the sins of a wicked generation, an evil generation of wicked people that are going to come into the world after them. In other words, the tzaddikim are removed from the world in order not to have to suffer the wickedness of these people. But the earth stands forever. For the earth is there to keep to the punishment that is going to come into the world on account of the sins of men, the sins of people. In other words, the Targum is explaining that the concept of the cyclical nature of the generations is not purely arbitrary, but that God may remove the righteous from the world to give the wicked reign for a time, and afterwards the wicked are withdrawn and the world is redeemed and the righteous can come back into the world. With that, let us take a look at the Metzudat David on verse 4. Dor hoilech, generation goes, generation comes. He wants to say that even if when this generation goes to die, even though another generation will come, nevertheless, there's no place to think that there may be some purpose in laboring and gathering acquisitions to leave to one's son after him, because, as we shall see in the continuation, there's no hope that the one that comes afterwards will not squander everything. And nevertheless, in saying that the earth stands forever, he wants to say that the earth herself stands forever is like even the earth itself is like a garment that gets worn out and eventually comes to an end. And if so, all the inhabitants of the earth with all of their possessions, this is certainly, if the earth itself is ultimately destined to turn to nothing, so all the acquisitions of people are destined to turn to nothing. With that, from verse 5 onwards, we go into a metaphor of the sun, which, as we have already heard from Rashi, is concerned with expressing the vanity of the wicked who rise up with success like the sun but eventually fall. Let us read the next couple of verses and understand exactly what they are saying. וזורח השמש ובוא השמש ואל מקומו שואף זורח הוא שם. We must take a very earth-centered view in looking now at the sun. The sun rises and the sun sets. And all the time the sun is longing to get to its place, the place where he is going to go back and shine the next day. Holech el darom, the sun goes to the south. V'soivev el tzafon, the sun turns around to the north. Soivev, soivev, hoilech haruach, around and around goes the spirit. V'al svivoisov shov oruach, and all around it the wind or the spirit returns. What exactly is this talking about? It's talking about from an earth-centered view, particularly in the land of Israel, where this phenomenon is seen very beautifully. Every day, of course, the sun rises in the east and it goes across the skies and it sets in the west. The actual path of the sun in the northern hemisphere is always going from the place that it rises in an arc towards the south, and the sun goes in this great arc around the earth, depending on the time of the year, until the sun sets. Well, now, the sun on the eastern horizon will rise in different places throughout the year. The times when the sun rises at the very due east is at the time of when the day and the night are equal, and the sun rises in due east and sets due west, approximately. As if we go from the spring, from the month of Nisan, and we go forward in the year, every day of the year until the middle of until the beginning of the fourth month, Tammuz, each day the sun is rising a little more south of the point where the sun rose yesterday. And so it goes on until the longest day of the year. And then as the days begin to shorten, the sun now begins to to rise on the east each day a little further north. So in the course of the sun's rising through the summer months, the sun is successively, day by day, moving further south, and it gets to its most southernmost point, and then it starts going back towards the north on the eastern horizon until we come again to the day when the days and the nights are even. And I think I've probably gotten you confused with all of this, because in fact I should have said that from the Nisan equinox, when the day and the night are even, every day the sun rises a little further north. And each day as you come to the middle of the year, the sun rises further and further north on the eastern horizon until the sun is at its northernmost point at the longest day of the year, and then successively the sun moves south day by day in its point of rising in the east, and by the autumn equinox, the sun is now at the rising due east, and as the days get shorter after the sun is moving further and further to the south until at the peak of winter at the beginning of the month of Tevet, the astronomical month of Tevet, the sun is at its southernmost point where it rises in the east. And the sun is conceived by our sages as rising up from the east and going all the way along its southern path and then turning up towards the north, depending again on the time of the year, all through the summer from the even day and night of Nisan until the middle of until Tammuz. The sun is setting further and further north, and then from the from the beginning of Tammuz until Tishrei, the sun starts making its southern movement where it sets on the western horizon until by Tishrei, by when the day and night are even, the sun is due west, and then as the winter closes in, the sun moves further and further south. And that is what lies behind this verse. And there is something that is actually moving the sun in this course, in this cyclical course, and that is what is mentioned in verse 6, the Ruach. The Ruach, which we would translate as the wind or the spirit, is actually, as we see in the interpretation of Rashi, the angel that is directing the sun. Let us look at Rashi's comments on verse 5. V'zorach hashemesh Rashi puts this new verse with the previous verse, the generations. Just like the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening and goes on its journey all through the night and is on its way panting to get back to the place where it's going, where it started shining yesterday. And it'll come back and start shining again, rising in the east yet again. So too the generations go, and even though the sun rises to its great height, it eventually declines and sets in the west. And now here in verse 6, Rashi gives us this important insight. Ruchoi shel shemesh. This is the spirit of the sun. And Rashi quotes the verse from the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 1, speaking about how the Ophanim, the great wheels of creation, the Ophanim, the angels, are actually animated and moved by the higher level of the Hayot, the vital forces, and they are the Ruach. Wherever the Ruach, the higher force, wants the lower force to go, that is where it's got to go. And says the verse, Al Sevivoisov Shav, the sun circuits on its circuits. The whole circuit and round that it went yesterday, it does the same circuit again, but as we see here, verse, Holech El Doram, the sun goes to the south constantly during the day, and turns around to the night, to the north constantly by night. Now it's in this here that Rashi explains to us this mystery. Sovev Holech, the sun goes on this eternal cycle. El Panei Mizrach Umayrev, whether it's going to whether it's on the eastern side or the western side. She'pa'omim machloton bayom, pa'omim there are times when the sun will actually go on these eastern or western points during the day. That is when the days are very long in the summer and the sun rises far to the north of due east and sets far to the north of due west. There are other times when these same points, the sun goes around them at the night time. That is to say, B'Tammuz, it's in the month of Tammuz, the height of the summer. Malachton, that's when the sun visits these points north of due east and north of due west. V'Teves Sevavton, but in the month of Teves, the height of the winter, the sun goes around them in the sense that it's nighttime when the sun is at those places. And so too the wicked, no matter how much the sun shines, no matter how much their sun shines, it's going to end up sinking. No matter how much they go and get stronger and stronger, apparently in the end they're going to go back to the place where they were drawn out of, the place of their filth. And to that place of filth where they came from, that is the place where they will go to. So that is the first metaphor we have in our text. The next metaphor is that of the rivers. The rivers in verse 7, כל הנחולים הולכים אל היום, והיום איננו מולא, אל מקום שהנחולים הולכים, שם הם שבים ללכת. All of the rivers are going down to the sea, but the sea is never full. And to the place that the rivers are going, that is the place where they are going to go back and go there again. It's a constant cycle. What is, in contemporary terms, we would say that this is the water cycle where the waters of the sea evaporate and the clouds carry the waters elsewhere where the rains fall and seep into the ground and bring forth the springs. Rashi has a rather interesting, different view of this. The rivers go to the sea, the sea is not full. Because the water of the rivers doesn't remain in the sea. Because the ocean is higher than all of the entire world. I think you can see this if you stand at the very seashore and look at the sea ahead of you. It does look as if the sea, the great ocean, is rising up high above you. And how is it that the water doesn't come cascading down upon us? And how do we learn that the ocean is higher than all the world? Because it says in the prophet, he calls to the waters of the sea and he pours them forth. From where does a person pour forth? From above down below. So, since the sea is higher than the earth, according to this view, perhaps it means spiritually higher than the earth. In any event, the rivers, the rivers go in sort of passageways, some kinds of tunnels under the mountains from the ocean, and come and start flowing again from the point where they seep out of the cracks of their source springs from the mountains. That is the meaning of the verse. To the place where the rivers go, that is where they return. So to the wicked person, just as he came, so he will go. Indeed, Kohelet is getting us into points that will be the very essence of his reproof as he goes on. The world is really infinite. It's impossible to grasp all of it, so why do we even try? Verse 8, Kol ha-devorim yegeim. All things are full of effort and labor, wearisome. Lo yuchal ish ledaber. A person could not express it all. Le sispa ein lirais. The eye could never be satisfied with seeing it. The ear will never be filled with hearing all of it. Let us look at the words of our commentators on this verse. Kol hadarom yigeim, all things are wearisome, lo yisis ba'ayin, lo timol ha'oizen, musav al ma yischon. Rashi explains to us that this verse is continuing the thought that began earlier in the portion in verse 3. In other words, the verses about the coming and going of the generations, the sun and the rivers, were all metaphors to explain the vanity and emptiness of the wicked. And now, turning back to what gain is there, Rashi explains, if a person will exchange his proper mission of engaging in the study and practice of the Torah to speak idle words of emptiness, which are the very things that exhaust a person, even so he will never be able to attain everything. If the person comes to desire to see everything, the eye will never ever be satisfied. There will always be more. If the person wants to hear everything possible, the ear will never ever be filled. And all this is because of what is explained now in the ensuing verses. Ma shehoya hu sheyihyeh, u'ma shena'asa hu sheye'oseh, ve'in kol chodosh tachas hashomesh. What was is that which will be. What was done is that which shall be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Here, let us go to the Targum on verse 9. Verse First of all, let's go back to Targum on verse 8. All the things that are destined to be in the world, already the prophets exerted themselves, the early prophets, and they themselves could not find the end of the matter, because no person is permitted to speak about what is destined to come after him. The eye cannot see everything that is destined to come in the world, and nor can the ears will ever be filled in hearing everything that is going to happen to all the inhabitants of the world. Continuing on verse 9, what was, that is what will be. It says Targum, Marhavos min k'dmosa u'asad mehevei bosar kein. Whatever happened before is going to be happening again. What has been done before, that is what is going to be done over again until the end of all the generations. Again, this amazing cosmic cycle that is going on and on. The Targum here adds the all-important expression, there's nothing new in this world under the sun. Nothing new in this world under the sun. There is a very important comment made by the Metzudat David relating to the interpretation of the sun here in this section of Kohelet. Let's turn now from the Targum to the Metzudat David to explain the very negative connotations of the word sun. This is Metzudat David's comment on the earlier verse 3, where we ask the question, which this is the continuation of, what benefit is there to a person for all of his labor under the sun? These are the words of Kohelet with which he opens, and he says, what profit comes to a person with all the labor and exertion that he exerts in any matter that is under the rule of the sun? That is to say, the exertion in acquiring possessions, all of the world economy and all of people's ability to gain wealth, it's all under the apparatus of the heavens. That is to say, there are astrological forces that determine how people, in which status people are born and what will be their destiny, although we know and believe, and King Solomon will mention later, that this can be changed. Now, explains Metzudat David, Solomon mentions the sun because the sun is the heavenly luminary that is most influential in the lower worlds. That is to say, quite obviously, the sun governs so many processes on earth that are vital to everybody's lives, and the sun is larger than all of them. That would be certainly the way the sun appears to us. And that's why it's a very, very illuminating comment. That's why the sun is called Melechet Hashemayim. The sun is called the queen or the ruler of the heavens. Miloshen Melucha. This expression comes from the Hebrew word with the connotation of rule and kingship. And thus we have in the prophecy of Jeremiah, chapter 46, he castigates the people who were offering incense to Melechet Hashemayim, the people who escaped from the destruction of the first temple, but then wanted to evade what the prophet told them to do. They preferred to give their incense to the Queen of the Heavens, a much misunderstood verse. And here Metzudat throws light on this, that indeed these people are worshipping the materialism which is underneath the sun in the material world, as if to say, what is the benefit of all of these acquisitions, because tomorrow the person that gathered them will die, he will take nothing in his hand. Likewise, the expression under the sun means that referring generally to this world, the world where the sun shines. What profit is there for a person in all the labor that the person labors to make acquisitions? So going back now towards the end of this parasha, verse 10, Yesh dovar sheyomer re'ei zeh chodoshu. Is there anything where a person might say, hey, look, this is new, a new fashion, a new fad, a new this, a new that? Kva hoyo la'ilomim. It's already been there from eternity. Asher hoyo miflonenu, that which was before us. And the closing verse of the seemingly very pessimistic introduction to the work, unless we understand that Kohelet is implying that only if we pursue the truth of the Torah will we get the benefit of that which is above the sun. The last verse of this introduction, Ein zicheroin lo rishonim v'gam lo aharonim. There's no recollection of the ones that were there first, also not those that will be there afterwards. They will have no recollection, together with those that will be at the very end. Here let us look at Targum on verses 10 and 11. Is there anything that a person could say, hey, look, this is something new, and it already was? It already was for eternity in the days of the generations that were before. There is no memory to the early generations, and nor to those that will be after them that are destined to come into the world, and nor will those after them be remembered at all with a generation that will be in the days of Melech HaMashiach. Well, this indeed is something hopeful to us, that all of this cycle under the sun will ultimately culminate in the generation that will be worthy to see King Solomon, to see King Mashiach. Let us turn now to Rashi's comments on these closing verses of this section. First of all, on verse 9, that which was, that is what shall be. Everything that a person may have learned with respect to any matter that is an exchange of the sun, that is to say, some material item that the person has devoted him or herself to, forsaking the Torah, there's nothing new in it. The person will only ever see something that already was, that was created within the time span of the 6 days of creation. But when a person will meditate on the Torah, the person will constantly find new tastes, chidushei ta'amim, new reasons, new ideas. This is a most important concept, particularly in the writings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, that we must constantly seek new understandings, new levels of understandings of the Torah. That is to say, in familiar verses, familiar sections of the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Kabbalah. We must constantly be seeing new levels, and this is the reason why the King Solomon in Proverbs tells us that the breasts sustaining the soul with the milk of the Torah, they will satisfy you all the time. As our sages commented, just like the woman's breast, all the time that the baby is feeling it and sucking it, the baby finds some taste in it. So the words of Torah, as we cherish them, we fondle them, we think about them, we ponder them, so there's always something new. And so we find in Tractate Hagiga that Rabbi Eliezer, the great Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, stated things that no ear had ever heard when speaking about the work of the chariot, the secrets of the Kabbalah. Rabbi Eliezer was able to find entirely new dimensions because of the depths to which he went in pondering and contemplating the words of the Torah. And on verse 10, comments Rashi, is there anything that a person say, this is new? Has anything come to your hands under the sun that whoever it is could say to you, well, see, this is something new? It's not new. It already was forever in the ages that went before us, except that as we learn in the following verse, nothing is remembered of those who came first. We don't remember all the things that they thought were terribly new. All of that, all the things that they did is all forgotten, and that's why it seems to us that it's new. That's why it looks as if it's new, concludes Rashi, commenting on verse 11, about this lack of any memory of earlier generations to the later generations, even the very last that will be after those who are after us. They will not be remembered in the generations that come after them. And the Midrash Agadah interprets this verse when it speaks about the erasure of all memory as alluding to the final destruction of all memory of Amalek, who is destined eventually to be wiped out, blotted out from the world. As the prophet Obadiah says, there will be no survivor to the house of Esav, because Amalek was the grandson of Esav. Just to conclude this discussion today with looking at the comments of the Metzudat David on these last couple of verses, he says on the verse 9, what was, that is what will be, as if to say, if a person would be deceived into thinking that okay, so it was in the early generations that the people were constantly laboring but never found any gain from what they were doing. But maybe it's different today. Maybe today we can achieve what we're laboring for. He says you should know that what was always there as it was. What was is now recurring today. And what has happened from that time, this alone is what's going to be happening in the future. Don't imagine that there's any way out of this material roundabout except by rising up to the Torah. There's nothing new in the place over which the sun shines, namely the entire material world. Just as nothing changed in the world, nothing changes with the circuit of the sun from day to day, so nothing changes here in the vanity and the futility of the material world, because for eternity nobody will ever attain his hope through the exertion and labor he will invest, just like nobody ever did. Is there anything that is found in this world that you could say this is absolutely true, complete novelty? If a person begins to think that things have changed from what they were, they will change in the sense that a person might accomplish what he hopes to completion. He says, no, do not believe if somebody tells you that there's something new that they've been able to achieve, because the truth is that there already was such a thing in the long days before, and it's all been done before. And all of those generations, the fact is that the reason we may think things are new is simply because nobody remembers what was actually done and actually thought and actually happening in those early generations, because they're all been forgotten from the hearts of men. And likewise, this will happen with the generations that will come after us. We shall be forgotten, and all of this is a tremendously sobering introduction to King Solomon's Kohelet. There is incalculable treasures in the ensuing chapters of this most amazing work with the light of our Mephoroshim. With the help of God, in our next session, we will be looking at the story of the life of King Solomon and the place of Kohelet in his lifetime, and some of the Agadot, some of the rabbinical stories about Kohelet and about the place of Kohelet in the canon of the Tanakh. And with that, we conclude today's class, and details of the next class, its time, will be publicized on azamra.org website and also in our diary email. I'm hoping that the ensuing sessions of our study of Kohelet will be not on Sundays at the regular time of the Shavua Tov classes, but on a different day of the week, very possibly Wednesday. And if you cannot catch the time at which the class is broadcast from here in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, then you will, God willing, be able to watch the archived video on the azamra.org website, and also listen to the MP3 audio recording on the azamra.org website. With that, Shalom uvracha, Shavua Tov Mvorach, blessings from the holy city of Jerusalem.